As London Tech Week gets ready for its dynamic launch tomorrow, the world of AI continues to disrupt our lives. Literally as we speak, ChatGPT and OpenAI are on their way to court to defend a defamation of character lawsuit. Then we have the European Union, and it's dotting its I's and crossing its T's with regards to the first AI piece of legislation that's due to come out in 2025. And then we have Adobe that has just launched its first text to image generator called Firefly that seeks to provide some level of indemnity against users of its product. Before I dive into the overview of what all of that means, welcome to today's show. If you're new here, my name is Bybreen and I help baby boomers reinvent themselves psychologically, practically, and technically so they can thrive in their third act of life. And if you're one of my regulars, welcome back. Good to see you here. And if you're watching on replay, put replay in the chat. So we've got a whole week of technology that's been spotlighted here in London that kicks off tomorrow. But in the wider world of AI, there is so much happening. So we've got the first, which of what's going to be a whole host of novel cases that puts ChatGPT in the spotlight. So here's the case. It's about defamation of character. So there's a newspaper editor of Ammoland, and he was reporting on a live case in Washington state, literally looking at the abuse of power from the Attorney General Ferguson in relation to his dealings with this gun foundation. So the editor, like we all do, go into ChatGPT, we give it a prompt, and the editor was looking for a summary of this case, which has been played out in Washington state. And as GPT does, what it does spectacularly well is it comes up with a solution. So it presented a summary that appeared to be really cogent and coherent and compelling in terms of the facts of this case. But here's the rub, and here is what's so problematic with the wonder of AI on the one hand, because the information that was provided in this legal summary was misleading and it was full of misinformation and it was false. And actually, what happened in this particular scenario was that the actual commentary that ChatGPT led with highlighted the fact that here we have this situation of this radio host in Georgia called Mark Waters, and they had included his name as if he was a defendant in the case. And he was accused, allegedly, ChatGPT accused this radio host of falsifying documents and, perjury, as well as, just real embezzlement with regards to this foundation. But you see, the problem was that Mark Waters had no connection, correlation with this particular foundation, and he wasn't even involved anywhere near this case. And so what we're seeing here with ChatGPT and OpenAI being taken to court is the thin end of what's going to be a huge, expansive wedge. Because we don't know the extent to which AI can do what it's going to do because of its powers and ability to replicate itself. And so this very innocent man, Mark Waters, has brought this case of defamation of character because all of the information in the summary and the case allegedly against him defamed his name. So, he's trying to defend his public and personal reputation. And hence why the need for regulation, rules, legislation is really needed now that AI is about to skyrocket in ways that we haven't seen before. Hence, we have the first European Union AI Act. It's the first of its kind in the West. And so what the EU have done, they're dotting their I's and they're crossing their T's to ensure that this new piece of legislation, which will be in force from 2025, has all that it needs. And actually, the legislation categorizes AI systems in three ways. So the first category is this unacceptable risk that these systems, these large language models, whether they're text-based, image-based, doesn't really matter. But, what is the unacceptable risk that they pose to lives of citizens? And it's anything that's going to damage and encroach and breach our fundamental human rights. So that's the first category. The second category is of high risk AI systems, where there could be the significant risk of breach, and hence why you're going to start hearing this phrase called guardrails. And so legislators around the world are calling for these guardrails with regards to what protections could be put in place to ensure that we as citizens are really protected. And then the final category is low risk. So whatever the AI system is, it will be deemed to be of low risk, hence why it will be unregulated. Now, there are three key areas that the European legislation will cover and it will ban. The first one is around facial recognition. And so they're going to be banning the use of facial recognition because of the recognition of how discriminatory it is of citizens around the world. The second area, which you may be unfamiliar with, particularly in the West, is around this social scoring. And so social scoring is practiced in China, it's practiced in Israel, and in some states in America. And the idea here is that we have these huge AI systems that begins to categorize citizens right across the world. That's the whole intention, based on their economic wealth or lack of it, but also of their social standing in the world. And so if you're not deemed to be of somebody to be paid attention to because you're scoring on a low level, then it's about, the gap between those who have and those who have not becomes wider, and hence why that type of scoring is going to be banned. And then the third area is around chatbots. So I've indicated about this case, this novel case that's going through, that's about defamation of character. But the EU legislation doesn't cover defamation of character. What it is pointing to is about copyrighted information. And a few weeks ago, I did a show on AI and its dirty secrets around copyright. And what it's proposing is that, chat bots that use copyrighted information, and invariably they do use copyrighted information because they're sweeping the net and everything else to create and generate further information. So it's going to be banned around that. So that's a European model. Now, legislators right around the world are putting together their own regulations with regards to what can happen. How can they protect their citizens? Because wherever governments are around the world, the key thing that they're trying to do is to ensure that these tech companies don't create computer algorithms that then go on to encroach upon our human rights. And that's where the protection is. And so here in the UK, yes, we're no longer part of the EU, but we are developing our own guidelines. And our Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, is already in conversations with tech leaders with regards to ensuring and conversing around what could be these guardrails that add greater protection to citizens. And it's really important that they have those in place. Also, the UK is going to host the first global AI summit that takes place in the autumn of this year. So ordinary citizens around the world, the potency of AI and the problems that it can create. Now is the time that if it's not now, when, that as many people get involved in exploring and discussing what could these guardrails be, what are the ethical considerations. And you might be thinking, well, where could I start? You could start with your local councillor within your area, or maybe your MP, because this is being debated right around the world. So what we have is this legislation, as I mentioned, that's coming out in 2025. But in the meantime, you have tech companies like Google, for example, that's already liaising with the European Union. And they are working together to come up with what is known as an AI pact. So it's like a holding position in terms of rules and regulations that everyone can begin to abide by until the legislation kicks in 2025. So Google is currently working with the EU around this. Interestingly, OpenAI are saying, well, we might not be able to participate in, the AI Pact because it might place restrictions and limitations on what we can do. And this opens up something very interesting, because what we're seeing here, if that is the case, it's been alleged, if that is the case, we're seeing a clear separation of power. Who really decides what goes on in the world? And if you've got any questions around that, I read this fantastic book about, I don't know, 12, 15 years ago, called Who Runs Britain, which is like the Tony Blair, Gordon Brown scenario of when they were in government and how they kind of shared power, conceded power to the plutocrats. And so what we're seeing here is the potential and the power that these large tech companies have over our lives, which is even more reason why, wherever you are on the age spectrum, from baby boomers down and beyond through to the silent generation, every one of us needs to get involved in the development of the ethical protections for our lives. So that's what's going on from a legislative point of view. And as I said, each government around the world, they might be using the EU's blueprint to help build out. But, you can check with their government to see where they are with that. And then finally, what we have is Adobe. So Adobe is this, global design company. We've got Photoshop and everything else that goes with it. Then what Adobe have done is they have just launched um, their first text to image generator called Firefly. And they're being really proactive, and they're being really robust, because what they're saying is, we've created this AI system. It's really robust, and so robust, and we believe so much in what we've created, we are going to pay for anybody who uses our product and who is accused of copyright infringement. So essentially, what Adobe are doing, they're beginning to indemnify users of its product. So it provides a protection to us. So we're seeing this kind of shifting sands with regards to new technology, with regards to AI, but with regards to the pernicious effects AI is having, particularly when it's dealing with this defamation of character lawsuit brought by Mark Waters. But we're going to see a proliferation in ways that we can't even begin to imagine. And, as ordinary consumers, we might be thinking, yeah, but, ChatGPT, it's fantastic. I can just go in and do my prompt. Well, actually, under this new proposed European legislation, what they're saying is, you might be falling foul. There's a commercial law, legal company here called Lewis Silkin. And what they're saying is, well, let's take the scenario, because we're looking at the protection of everyday consumers, but let's take the scenario of medical AI. So there's an AI system that's going to help write letters, patient letters, that might be shared with other medics and clinicians or beyond. But what is kind of coming up on the horizon is, well, we could be falling foul in those types of situations, because these letters and notes will include sensitive information that's from our personal, medical records that we may not have given consent to. So if we're using AI in this particular field, and don't forget, healthcare, health systems is a huge industry, one of the biggest industries, if not the biggest industry in the world. So we're going to be seeing the impact of AI and the limitations, which will then help push, narrow, reconsider how we, as everyday consumers of these wizardry pieces of technology, are being called to account. We're bringing a level of consciousness in terms of our interactions, but also the regulations that's been proposed by Europe and any other of the government regulations around the world. What they're essentially doing are creating these regulatory sand pits, so that tech companies, as they're developing their AI systems, they can be playing in the regulatory sandpit to see, does it breach what's been set down? If it breaches it, it can't be used, so it doesn't come into the public domain. But actually, it might still be of high risk, but where could these guardrails be built in? So I wanted to bring this information to you. This one was more of an overview that begins to help educate you, that you might be inspired to go off and gain some better understanding about what's happening with regards to AI, because none of us can escape it. And the more informed and educated we are means that we're in a better position to navigate our own lives, but the world around us. So I'd actively encourage you to take a deep dive into that. If you're already using these large language models, what things are you seeing? Are you seeing any limitations? Are you seeing things that make you raise your eyebrow? I'd love to hear, put them in the comment box below. As I mentioned, it's London Tech Week, so I'm going to have a whale of a time this week going to London Tech Week. I'm actually going to its AI Summit, which I think is a 2 or 3 day event. So it's going to be fascinating to hear, enterprise AI, what's happening, but also consumer AI, where all of us, the majority of us sit. What are the implications now that we have this first potential test case where OpenAI and ChatGPT will be in the dock to defend against this defamation of character lawsuit? So that's it for today. I would love if you would like and subscribe and share this information with other fantastic baby boomers in your life who you feel who could benefit from what it is that I have to offer here, that helps them to reinvent themselves in powerful and dynamic ways. I'm going to have a fantastic week at London Tech Week. I hope you have a brilliant week, whatever you're doing, and I will see you again next Sunday, 3:30 here. Stay well, and I'll see you next week. Bye.